All right. Welcome, everybody. Looks like it's time for us to go ahead and jump in and get started. Before we even start, welcome. My name is Mike Hamilton. For those who don't know me, maybe you haven't seen some of my webinars and things before, I am one of the founders and first people here at MadCap Software. A bit of my background, I've been in the industry a long time, and I actually started way back under the Blue Sky software days, way back doing, WinHelp and things like that, been through the desktop publishing phase, word processing phase, the early web publishing phase, high-end PDF. So I should be able to handle just about any questions that come up on this presentation. Now, the title is an overview of MadCap Flare from content import to publishing, responsive online, and PDFs. So this is really geared for people who haven't seen MadCap Flare before. Now, if you've used Flare before and you're here, well, hopefully I'll still find a couple of nuggets, maybe a few new tips for you. But it's really kind of targeted people who haven't seen the product before. All right, so jumping right in. Before we can get started, a little housekeeping. I see a couple of people asking in the Q&A window already. Yes, this webinar will be recorded. You will get an email link once we have that recording published up on our website. And if you have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free. Now, with a group this size, we do have to mute the microphones and telephones, but this GoToWebinar interface does have a question and answer panel. I am lucky enough to have dual monitors, so I have the presentation that you are seeing on one monitor, but I can see the question and answer window on the other monitor, so I will be watching the questions as they come in. All right, so starting high level, before we even look at the live software, there are really three core reasons that people will even look at the MadCap software products, and more specifically, MadCap Flare. And the first reason that people will look at our software is to maximize their content reuse capabilities. To really summarize, in a MadCap Flare environment, content should only exist one time. If you're duplicating content, something is wrong. And that means different things to different customers. Some of our customers, they might need to reuse an entire chapter. The content that is chapter 3 in this manual needs to be chapter 7 in a different manual. No problem. We have customers do stuff like that all the time. The key thing is now if you need to update that content, you just have a single update point in the future. Now, what if you don't need to reuse an entire chapter? What if you have a procedure that needs to be shared across 6 manuals or 5 websites? Well, an entire procedure could be reused. Or if you need to get more granular than that, well, maybe I have 1,000 procedures I have to document, but the first 3 steps will be identical in all 1,000 procedures. Well, again, those 3 steps should only exist one time then. We can add them by reference into all 1,000 procedures. And then getting down to the really micro level, well, maybe we're documenting a software product, and in 300 places, the phrase from the file menu, choose save, shows up. Well, we can type that phrase one time and add it by reference then everywhere we need it. So when I say maximize content reuse, that can be content reuse down at the word level all the way up to recycling and reusing an entire chapter. And we'll look at more detail, kind of the mechanisms of how we make that happen. All right, the next big reason that people will look at our software is the multi-channel publishing capability. So not only does content exist only once, but I can recycle and reuse that content into online websites, an online knowledge base, online help systems supporting software applications, PDF files, Microsoft Word documents, ebooks. We can even use the content as an intermediary format to feed other systems, things like Salesforce content, Drupal content, all kinds of different ways to publish the content that we've authored in Flare. And now when you take those first two bullets and combine them, the content reuse and the publishing of multiple outputs, well, basically what I'm describing there is content management. Now, if you've been to our website, you'll probably notice we don't use that phrase a lot. We've just found that when you talk about content management, people start to freak out. Oh, that's not for me. That's too expensive. That's too difficult. That takes a whole army of consultants and programmers. That was content management 15 years ago. What MadCap has set out to prove is that adopting content management in this day and age is no more difficult than upgrading your copy of Microsoft Word. So the third bullet, we are known in the industry for bringing ease of use to content management. We actually make it accessible to mere mortals. You don't have to be a programmer or an expensive consultant anymore to be able to adopt content management functionality. All right, so that's the big picture view. Now to kind of compare and contrast to something that almost all of us are used to, if I compare it to Microsoft Word, and I'm not saying Word is bad. For a word processor, Microsoft Word is great. There are just some things it was designed to do, and content reuse is not really one of them. So the challenge that we have in Word is we may write a manual, and it's brilliant, you know, everybody loves it, and then the phone rings, and it's the executive team, and they say, you know, we really need a second version of that. So you end up copying or cloning the entire manual, all 200 pages, even though only 5 pages are going to be different. So now I have 2 manuals and 195 pages are identical. And if there's a policy change, if there's a procedure change, we have to make an update and it's in that common area, well, now we have to update the same content twice. It's not very efficient. And if those Word documents keep multiplying, if they keep getting copied, and the problem gets worse and worse and worse. So a great big not symbol on that workflow. We can't keep duplicating content and then trying to maintain it manually. Now, if we distill down to kind of a root cause problem, with Word, you're working on the right-hand side of this diagram. Your hand touching every single document, every customer copy. The whole idea with Flare is we want to move back to the left side of this diagram, where content only exists once. When we have to make an update, when we have to make an edit, we make that update or that edit one time on a master copy. Now, we can still deliver those unique customer versions that are on the right-hand side of this diagram. The key thing is we maintain the master copies and we let the software generate the individual customer versions. Now that sounds like some kind of magic or dark arts. It's really not like that at all. We do have to work a little bit differently though, because when you're working in a word processor like Microsoft Word, you're actually doing three things at once. We've all done it so much we don't think about it, but you're authoring content, yes, but you're also embedding all of your formatting, and you're defining the overall scope of the document. Now, scope, what do I mean by scope? Well, in Word, if I'm writing a training manual, that's all it's ever going to be, is a training manual. Or if I'm writing an installation guide, that is all that it will ever be, an installation guide. That scope is baked right into the document. Well, with a tool like MadCap Flare, we split those three components and make them separate. So content is completely separate from all the formatting and branding, and the formatting and branding is completely separate from the document scope. By separating those three components, we gain a lot of flexibility. But even separating the content out by itself isn't quite enough. One of the other problems with Word or any word processor is you're doing what's known as linear authoring. You start on page 1, and you type, and you type, and you type, and you get to page 200, and you call it a manual. And it's this long, linear, monolithic chunk of content. Well, in a content management world, we actually use a different technique called topic-based authoring. And that's an industry term, so we use it, but I'll be honest, I hate that term. It's not really descriptive of what we're doing. It's not really topic-based authoring, it's topic-based saving. When it says authoring, it sounds like, oh my gosh, I have to change how I write. You don't. We still write the same way. The trick is, if I look at that 200-page Microsoft Word document, well, maybe it has 5 chapters. If I zoom in on chapter 3, well, chapter 3 might contain 2 procedures and 2 reference sections. And we wrote that all as one big chunk. Well, in a tool like Flare that is topic-based, I would write the first procedure, save that as a topic file. Then I would write the second procedure, save that as a topic file. Then I would write the first reference section, save that. Right. So we don't save it as one big chunk. We save it as these smaller reusable topics. So I still write the procedure exactly the same way. I just now save it individually. Now, what's the advantage to that? Well, now instead of one long linear document, I now have this library of these individual topics that I can pull from. It's like making little Lego bricks of my content. So if I want to reproduce that big 200-page manual, well, I will grab the 2 procedure topics and the 2 reference topics that I have highlighted in green here. I will stitch those 4 topics together, and boom, there is chapter 3 of that manual. But now if 2 weeks later, I want to put together a knowledge base for the company website, well, maybe I will ignore those reference topics. I'll grab those 2 procedure topics, add to them 12 or 14 more procedure topics, and then I'll publish that using a web interface so we can have a knowledge base on the company website. So just by making content modular, we now have a single touch point for each of these topics, no matter how many documents they're included in. Now, I did notice a question just came into the Q&A window. asking, does Flare handle things like conditional markers, variables? Absolutely, and that's where I'm going next. Having this content reuse is great, but sometimes it doesn't fit every audience. Maybe I have this topic, placing objects. I want to reuse that, but maybe I'm documenting two different versions in a product family. There's a basic product and there's an advanced product, and the advanced product has a few extra options. I have to use that one topic for both products, but for the advanced version, I need more content. Well, that's where you need to be careful. Never, ever let those old Microsoft Word bad habits creep in. Do not start duplicating content. If I start duplicating topics, I have that same problem as duplicating Word documents, just at a smaller scale. So if I don't duplicate this topic, how do I accommodate both audiences? Well, that is where we get into the single source publishing procedures. Again, this is one of those industry terms, so we use it. It really makes it sound scarier than it is. All it means is I will put all content for all of my different publishing requirements, all of my different audiences in that one topic. Now that sounds like chaos. Actually, it isn't. So I start by writing my procedure or my reference page, whatever my content is. And if this first paragraph only applies to audience A, well, I can actually put a color-coded marker on that paragraph. I can say this first paragraph only applies when I publish for audience A. And then after that, I could have an alternate opening paragraph, but this only applies to audience B. So I'll put a different color marker on that paragraph. Now, if the next two paragraphs are common for everybody, I just leave those alone. And if this bottom paragraph only applies to a third audience, or maybe this is content that I only want in the PDF, but I don't need it on the website, I would apply a third color code. So it doesn't matter why content is unique. It could be by audience. It could be by publishing type. I've seen this used where, some content is confidential, internal use only. So if we publish an internal document, we want this content kept. But if I publish for the website, I need the content removed. So it doesn't matter. The key thing is, if it's unique, we identify it. Now, some people start to freak out and say, well, wait a minute, I can't do that. I can't let my customers see the other stuff. They won't. This is another thing to get used to. In Word, you are hand editing the actual file that the customer gets to see. In Flare, or in a content management environment, this topic that we're editing with these color codes, this is a master copy. Nobody will ever get to see this but the authoring team. This becomes the master copy from which the customer copy is generated. Now, how does that generation occur? Well, in an XML workflow, there is a process called transformation. And there are various techniques. If you're publishing to browser-based content, then typically an XSLT transformation is used. If you're publishing to print-based content, such as PDF, then usually an XSLFO processor using formatting objects is used. To be honest, most of our customers do not care. What technology is used is irrelevant. So we've tried to simplify the language. We just call these publishing targets. Think of a target as a recipe. How should my topics be processed to get a specific customer version? So in example, I could have a target here that says, include any of the content marked in red, exclude any of the content marked in blue or purple, and then any other rules. I want to publish to smartphones, include my smartphone templates. I want my company branding for company A, that's my partner. All of my look and feel actually gets applied at that target level. And if I have to produce a second version or a third version of this content, I can just define additional targets, additional little recipes. Once this is set up, it's just publish on demand. The sales team calls down and says, hey, I need the document for the red audience running on a smartphone. Okay, I invoke that first target, and that's the content set that I get running on a smartphone. And then marketing calls down, oh, hey, we need a version to update the website for the blue audience. I invoke the second target, and I get the correct content set, and it goes to the correct format. And then the training department calls, oh, we need an updated training manual for the purple audience, but we need it in PDF. Well, I invoke the third target then. So the key thing here, I can still deliver any unique version branded any unique way for any specific user. But if there's an update, if there's a policy change, I go back to the master copy, make that edit or that update once, and then the software is smart enough to tell me, oh, hey, you just made an edit to the getting started page that is currently used in, and it will tell me all of the defined targets that will need to be republished now so that every customer gets the correct information. All right, conceptually, that is how the software works. We're going to leave kind of concepts behind and start working more at kind of real world workflow. For most customers, adopting the MadCap Flare product is usually a 3-step process. Rarely are customers lucky enough they're starting fresh with all brand new content. So we usually have to leverage or import existing content. So Flare has built in the ability to import all of the file formats you see on screen on the left side right now. Probably the big two are importing from Microsoft Word and importing from Adobe FrameMaker. Now, those imports, will they keep your content? Absolutely, that's the easy part. Your lists will stay lists, your tables will stay tables, your images will be brought over. But deeper than that, if your document has any navigation built in, if it has a built-in table of contents, that will be kept. If you have any hyperlinks, those will be kept. In the case of something like FrameMaker, if you have any conditional markers, any variables, if you have any cross-reference type styles, any auto number type styles, all of that will be preserved and imported. Now, somebody has asked, well, what if our original file is in PDF format? Not a worry. The problem with PDF is it's basically a wrapper around PostScript data, which is basically printer language. All you have to do is go into that PDF and save as, and most viewers will give you the option to save as a Word doc or as RTF. We can also import RTF documents. All right, so those are the imports. I'll demonstrate a Microsoft Word import in a minute, but once we get content imported, well, then we'll look at the Flare authoring environment, the actual editor. Oh, and I saw the note, can we import Markdown? We don't currently import Markdown. We are getting more and more requests for it. For some reason, a lot of people seem to want to get out of Markdown these days. So that is something we're looking at doing. It's not something we have today. Now, after the import, we'll look at the editor, and I see a note about having to do a lot of formatting. Yeah, I'll debate that. I'll show you how to avoid formatting if you do the import correctly. All right, so after the import, we'll look at the editor, and then finally, when we get to the publishing phase, well, then we can publish to all of these different output types. So if that's the workflow, the last slide I'd like to show, this is kind of the functional diagram. One of the feedback I've received from a lot of people who've tried to use Flare for the first time is they can be a bit overwhelmed. They're used to a single Word document. It's a single file. It's pretty simple. And then they download the trial copy of Flare and they fire it up and they try to start, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of moving parts here. Actually, it's not as bad as you might think. So I mentioned that the target represents the recipe, that one customer deliverable. So that's kind of the core building block for my deliverable documents. The target that has all my publishing rules in it needs to pull in content. That content is going to be pulled in from that library, that collection of topics. Now it will scale to whatever size you need. I've seen Flare projects that were 50,000 topics, 100,000 topics, 200,000 topics, and larger. Well, what if I'm documenting an installation guide that's only going to be, 9 pages? I don't need all 100,000 topics. So we also define a table of contents file. The table of contents file is a map or an outline. It tells that target, for this installation guide, you don't want all 100,000 topics. You want these 304 topics, and you want them organized into this order and into these 4 chapters. So that's the whole purpose of the TOC. It brings that scope component back in. What is this document? What topics should be used? How should they be organized? Once the target reads that table of contents file, then just the correct topics are processed. So my content set is controlled by the blue boxes. Now, what branding, what look and feel should this installation manual have? Well, for that, the target is going to specify my style sheet settings. I can have unique style sheet settings for any deliverable or any audience. So even though we're reusing the same topics potentially, they could be presented in a completely unique fashion. So that way, if this is a print target, maybe all my text is in Times New Roman. If this is a web target, maybe all of my text is in Verdana. And if this is an ebook target, maybe all of my text is in Tahoma. We can literally restyle each individual document if necessary. Now that is good for controlling the look of my authored content, my topics. But in the case of something like PDF, we also need to control the headers, the footers, Are we going to have different headers and footers on odd pages and even pages? What should our chapter start page look like? Those components would all be controlled in a page level template. It's almost like working in InDesign. It's very graphical, very visual. You can just lay out the structure of your page almost like a container that the topics will then flow into during publishing. And if you need to publish browser-based content, then there is also a UI template for the web browser. What color schemes should be used, what icons, what kind of navigation are we going to have. So everything you see there in red, that controls all of my branding and look and feel. Now, when all of this comes together, we're able to output to any unique audience, any unique version. And I can keep adding additional targets as necessary. I've seen Flare projects that include hundreds of targets. Oh, question, UI template. What is UI? The user interface template. So what is the look and feel of the web interface? I did see a question come in there about what about content management? What about storage? We'll get to that at the very end, but as a sneak peek, Flare is compatible with all of your cloud services. If you want to use it with Box, if you want to use it with Microsoft's cloud, if you want to use it with things like Dropbox, you can. That's at the most basic level. It also integrates with the most common source controlled database options that are out there: Team Foundation Server, Perforce, Subversion, Git, and that way you have all the archiving and rollback capabilities you might need. Question by targets. Do I mean mediums, audience, or both? I mean both. I could have a target that generates PDF manual 24. I could then duplicate that target, change its style sheet and its page template assignments, and that can now be PDF document 24 rebranded for my business partner, and it has their look and feel. So that target, if remember back in Word, I said that in Word, you're authoring content, embedding format, and defining the scope. And in Flare, we would split those three apart. Well, the target is where we bring those three back together. The target is where I define, okay, what will my content set be? What will my branding and styling be? And what will be the overall scope of this published document? So that's why I call it like a recipe. That's really what it is. All right, so I've spent way too much time on the concepts. I don't want to run out of time for the live demonstration. So I am going to switch now. I'm going to get rid of the slides, hop out to my desktop, and most of my time is going to be spent on MadCap Flare. Very briefly, because it can be confusing, I want to talk about some of the other products, and time permitting, we'll demonstrate some of those very quickly at the end. But Flare is our flagship product. Flare has everything you need for importing content, editing content, authoring new content, and doing all of your publishing. So what are all the rest of these products for, all these little icons on my desktop? Well, Contributor. It is meant if you have someone who needs to edit content for you or write topics for you, but you don't want to give them full access to all of the power that is Flare. Because the problem is, if you have a copy of Flare, not only can you do content work, but you could change templates, you could edit styles, you can do all these. There are some people, I don't want them to have access to that. So Contributor is a lightweight editor It's really meant so after I've written something in Flare, if I want to send it to an engineer for a technical edit, I would want that engineer to use contributor. They would be able to see my XML files. It would look the same on their system as mine. They could make edits to my written content, but they could not change my templates, change my style sheets, do any publishing. So it's a much lighter weight version meant for review and editors to have. All right, then we have Analyzer. This is to help support the job of a technical editor. It will run about 40 different reports looking for things like, has the team over the years ended up duplicating any styles? It will say, oh, you have 6 different styles that all render text as dark blue Tahoma 12 point. Do you want to consolidate those down to one style? And it will fix my whole project. Or it will look for things like, oh, did you realize you have 6 broken links in various topics? And if a customer clicks those, they're going to get an error message, and we can go fix the broken links. Other reports in Analyzer. Oh, there are places where maybe we're using some of that single sourcing metadata, and I have a variable that allows me to rebrand the customer or the company name. Well, maybe somebody somewhere didn't realize that should be a variable, and they manually typed a customer name. It can catch that and flag, oh, this should be converted to variable text. So all kinds of reports in the Analyzer tool. And then these 2 blue icons, a capture utility and a movie building utility. What those are for, they're a bit different than the others in the industry. They will create screen captures or training or tutorial type movies, but with a twist. We can use the same single sourcing metadata in the images that we can use in text. And to my knowledge, MadCap Software is the only company in the world that has figured out a way to do that. So I'll demonstrate that as well. And then lastly, the Lingo tool, it is a translation management interface. So if you do write, 10,000 of these topic files, well, how do we manage the translation process? That is the purpose of the Lingo tool. It will track every file, give you real-time status. Is it pending? Has it been sent to translation? Has it come back from translation? What percentage complete are we before you send it to translation? It can automatically compare it against an existing translation memory database, maybe from last year. We can automatically send the pre-translated items to the translation company to save money. The whole purpose of Lingo is to manage that translation process and reduce costs as much as possible. All right, so those are all the different tools, but I'm going to focus primarily on Flare, and that is what we're going to start with. Oh, and somebody just put, what about Central? Well, Central's not a desktop tool, so it's not on my desktop, but I will touch on Central at the very end. It is a cloud-based service that we offer. I don't want to get too far ahead, though. We'll touch on that towards the end. All right, so I'm going to pull up a copy of Flare now. Now, this copy is completely empty. On the left, it says no project loaded. Now, before I dive in and start importing Word documents, I do want to point out this start page. If you download the trial version, we don't want to just leave you on your own. So on this start page, there is a getting started guide if you would prefer to read the details. There's a getting started video if you would prefer to watch the information. And then there's a getting started tutorial that will walk you step by step how to do a Microsoft Word import, how to do basic edits, how to set up to do your first publishing, how to generate to a website, how to generate a PDF version. So all the details to walk you through your first Flare project. So that is where I would recommend new people start. We're going to jump way past that though. I'm going to go up to the File tab. I'm going to tell the Flare software I want to create a new project. That's just a new container of content. It's everything I need, my topics, my images. If I need it for publishing, it will be in this project container. So I want a new project, but I want it to be created from some existing Word documents. So I'll choose the Word documents option. I now have to do some housekeeping. What will I name this project? Where will I store it? Once I've set my settings there, now Flare says, okay, where are these Word documents? I'll click the little green plus sign. That's going to let me navigate out onto my hard drive. And I'm going to select 4 documents and import them all at the same time. The only limitation to how many Word documents you can import at once is A, how large are those Word documents, and B, how powerful is your computer. If I'm on a brand new top of the line computer, I might import 10 Word documents at once. If I'm on a 7-year-old computer that's just, barely creaking along, well, maybe I only import 2 or 3 at a time. So that's really the limitation, is kind of how much horsepower your computer has. I'm going to do 4, but I'm also making a beginner mistake here. 3 of these Word documents were written by an engineer using the stock Microsoft Word template. 1 of these documents was written by the marketing department, and they have heavily modified their Microsoft Word template. Ideally, I would probably do that as 2 separate imports. I might want to process those files a little bit differently. But I'm going to make that mistake just to show you how it works. So I've grabbed all 4. I click Open. Now when I click the Next button, you should see a little green progress bar. And that will be the Flare software doing a deep scan of those Word documents, looking for everything we can extract. Well, unfortunately, my computer was a little bit too fast. I didn't even see that green progress bar, but it did that scan. And now one of the first questions it asks, my gosh, some of these Word documents are huge. Do you want us to automatically break those big Word documents into smaller topic files? Ooh, yes, please. But another beginner mistake. If I grab the heading 1 style that was found, and if I use that blue arrow and I move it over to the right, and that tells the software whenever you encounter a heading 1, use that as a point to stop, save, begin a new topic. Well, unfortunately, these documents probably only have 1 heading 1 each, but let's see what happens. I'll click Finish. Flare just processed my Word documents, just as I feared. I only ended up with 4 topics. By selecting any of the files on the left, I get a nice preview over on the right. And this didn't really break into topics. This is like an entire chapter. So I didn't do a very good job with my settings here. Well, no big deal. That's why it's a preview window. If I'm not happy, I'll click the Cancel button. That will take me right back to the import settings. And this time I'll say, well, let's go down to the heading 2 style as well. That will give me smaller topics. And then I remember, oh yeah, I have that silly marketing document in there. They have a different heading 1 and a different heading 2. So I'll move those 2 styles over as well. Now, you can iterate 3 or 4 times if necessary. I happen to know that those settings should be pretty good. So now if I click Finish, Now I'm getting over a dozen individual topic files. This is much better. This is a better fit to that topic-based environment. All right, now somebody in the Q&A window asked earlier, yeah, but don't I have to do a lot of cleanup? Perhaps, depending on how high quality or low quality the styling was done in the original Word document. But if I just click accept right now, what Flare is going to do, it's going to extract the styles from Word or FrameMaker, depending on what I'm importing, and use that data to create a new style sheet. If I do that and the resulting styles need way too much cleanup, then we want to go to the advanced level. What I'm about to show is optional. You don't have to do it. But if I have a nice, pretty, beautiful style sheet, I can jump ahead using the next button. I can link to my beautiful style sheet that I already have. And then when I click next, I can do style mapping. I can say, okay, in Microsoft Word, there is a style named examples. Don't recreate that in Flare. Instead, I want that to map, and I would go to the list on the right, which I didn't actually link to a style sheet. If I had, it would list all the styles from maybe I have a style p.demonstration. I would select p.demonstration, click map. Well, now it will do the style mapping from the Word name styles to my name styles in my style sheet during the import. And that would give me total stylistic control. All right, but I'm not going to do that for demo purposes. I'm just going to stick with what's coming in from Word. So I am going to click Finish now. I'll see that preview one last time. Somebody asked, is that preview screen in the trial? Yes, the trial version is fully functional. The only limit to the trial version is if you generate a PDF or if you generate a set of web pages, it will scramble every 16th character in the text so it looks like it has typographic errors. That way, it can't be used for customers, but you can do a full test on it that way. Okay, I'll click accept. We're starting to run out of time here, so I'm going to speed up. All right, so here we go. What was 4 separate Word documents is now about a dozen XML topics. Briefly, the editor itself. If I don't even know how to spell XML, I can still use this editor. I can use it just like a word processor. I can press the Enter key, get a new paragraph. I can type, I'll type red, blue, green. If I want to create a numbered list, again, just like in a word processor, I can highlight those lines, select numbered list from the ribbon bar. So very familiar interface. But now for the power. One of the key powerful things in XML is having access to document structure. Can I get that? Absolutely. Most tools will make you go into a code view to see the structure. We wanted something easier. So on my lower toolbar, I have an icon where I can turn on a graphical representation of all of the code elements behind this topic. And I can even manipulate those code blocks. If I decide that green is in the wrong position, it should be in position 2 in my list. Well, in a word processor, you're stuck doing the cut, copy, paste, break list, fix list dance. Here, I can just grab the LI code element, click and drag with my mouse, and that blue arrow will show me anywhere where it's legal and valid to drop a list item. So I can manipulate the structure. Most of our customers do not go this far. But if you're in that top 5% and you really want to see the raw code, well, in the lower right corner, there's an up caret. I can do a split screen, and the two editors will synchronize. If I highlight in one view, it will highlight in its twin. And if you don't want the split screen, on the very bottom where it says text editor, there's a tab, and then I can get access to just the pure raw code. So 4 different ways to render the editor. Oh my gosh, we are running out of time. I need to publish this content now. It's imported well. We've briefly looked at the editor. How do we get stuff out of Flare? I go to the project tab. The first thing I need is one of those table of contents files. Because we did an import, Flare created one for me. This is all of the topics from that Microsoft Word import in their original order, which is good, but it's a little bit boring. Now I can adjust this manually. I can just click on this topic and drag to the right if I want to indent that item. But I'm over 50, and that will make my wrist hurt after a few minutes. So I will use the blue arrows over on the toolbar, and that will let me fly through this content very quickly and set up how I want to group or structure my table of contents. How do I want to stitch these topics back together? Once I've defined that table of contents, I'll save. And now let's see how quickly I can do a web portal, a web knowledge base, and a PDF. I'll open the targets. One of them gets built in automatically. This will be my web portal. I'm not even going to look at it. Right-click, build. Build tells Flare to process all of my files and get them ready to go up to the web server. When it turns dark green, it's finished. I'll select that line and view output. I can view on any browser installed or even on a smartphone or tablet software emulator. I'll just do Internet Explorer. And of course, it opened on the wrong monitor. Let me drag this over. But here is the content that I just imported from Word and edited. That table of contents that I adjusted automatically became 3 drop-down menus across the top. I can use that to navigate. Search was built in automatically. Search results are very Google-like. And I don't have time here, but we do have an editor that will allow me to go in and change the colors, the logos. There's several different templates you can choose from. But that would be a web portal look. I decide I don't like that. I want more of a traditional knowledge base or online help look. Well, I'll open that target. I'll go to the web template, the skin file, change it to Tripane. With that one adjustment, I'll click the build button again. This time, same exact content, but instead of the drop-down menus at the top, I now have a more traditional table of contents that's browsable on the left. So very easy to change the look and feel or the presentation of the web content. And then people say, well, yeah, that's great, but how do I get a PDF now? Here's one of the coolest things. That HTML5 target, it's already publishing the correct content in the correct order. I want to leverage that. I'm going to right-click on that target and copy, and then right-click again and paste. That just made copy of. I'll rename it PDF. Now it's still showing the HTML5 logo. So I'll double click on that to open it in the editor, and I'll change the output type from HTML5 to any other format that I want. I'll choose PDF, and just very quickly, I'll spot check. Okay, yep, everything is set up. Click build. Now, this isn't going to be super fancy. I didn't define the PDF template, so I won't have any headers or footers, but it did give me my full content set. My table of contents generated automatically, my bookmarks panel generated automatically. If I scroll down, all of my content flows together. And if I jump to the very end of the book, one of those Word documents I imported had an index marker. Not only do we preserve it on the import, it was able to be recycled and reused in the PDF manual. So it prints correctly on paper, but if you're viewing it in the reader like I am, well, if I click on the page number, it will jump right to that page. So in under 10 minutes, I was able to produce 3 separate outputs. All right, now, there were some things that were promised that I haven't gotten to yet. One of them was, how do we manage the content using a database? In fact, somebody asked about that earlier. All you do is talk to your database administrator, have them set up a new storage location for you. Putting your content into the database is easy. I go to the Project tab, Project Properties, Bind Project. I'm going to bind mine into Git. It's free, it's open source. I happen to have it on this computer, but I could choose Team Foundation Server, Subversion, Perforce, any of the other options. Once it's configured, I click OK. That's it, I'm done. Everything I just imported from Microsoft Word, it's all stored in a database now. If I go in and make an edit, new stuff, and I click save, well, now that I'm in a database, there's a little red check mark here. What that indicates, I need to push that edit that I just made into the database. I have a new source control tab that we didn't have a few seconds ago. I can commit that, new stuff, and commit. That just got pushed into the database. So 100 of my team members can all see that edit, and we can all work together in one massive Flare project stored in that database on the network. And if a manager wants to see a history, I click View History, and now I have rollback, compare 2 versions. Here's the original version. Here's the version where I added new stuff. I can even see the exact date and time and the name of the staff member who made that edit. So full rollback, tracking, and audit trails. The other thing was the webinar invite talked about facilitating responsive design. Well, the good news, that gets built in for free. So if I go back to my HTML5 target and I open it back up again, oh, would you quit opening on the wrong monitor? So I'll pull this over. By default, it opens in desktop mode. But if someone were to open this on a tablet, it would automatically switch to tablet mode. The navigation would suppress itself, and I can always get it back when I want. And then if it were going to go down even further into a phone interface, I didn't set it up to do it, but it could adopt a second time. So it can automatically adapt between desktop, tablet, and phone. And then finally, somebody asked earlier about Central. So if you're not familiar with Central, let me pull it up quickly. This brings the other part of content management to the table, the management part. We only have about 1 minute left, so I'm not going to go through the whole process, but you would enroll all of your users, combine them into teams if it's a large group, and then let me pull up the task board. This is where we can now go in, link this to our Flare project, and I can create and assign tasks to any of our staff members. I have a to-do list on the left. These are all of the pending tasks. As people start to actually perform those tasks, they can grab a task, drag it over and drop it to the in progress column. You can see these little cumulative numbers at the top. It will track hours, what's pending, what's in progress, what's complete. And if you're the manager, you can also overlay all of this task assignment onto a calendar. And that way you can check kind of your loading for the months to come. Do we have too much work in one week, not enough work in a different week? So this is something that just came out last year, kind of the project management aspect of content management. Now, also with this central tool, if you don't want to deal with your own database for storage, it can also act as the database backend for source control. And if you don't have a good relationship with your web team, then Central can also do hosting and get your content web accessible. I realize that was kind of a quick glance at Central, but I did want to get that in there. All right, looking at the clock, I need to wrap up. I know there's some questions that came in. The good news, we're going to get all those questions answered, and we'll respond back via email to everybody who is registered. So as I wrap up, one, because you've attended this webinar, there are some discounts available if you want to sign up for any of the upcoming March training classes. There's no magical keyword or tricky number. Just contact your salesperson, tell them you were in this webinar. They can look up the attendee stats to verify, and you will get that discount. Also, I showed 2 different web presentations. I also mentioned there are other templates available. Well, Flare has several built in already, but just this week, 4 new web templates were uploaded to our website by our staff. So you can hop up to our website if you want to download those new templates, if you're already a Flare user, or if you want to test them out with the trial version. These 4 will probably end up being rolled into the actual Flare software at some point. But as of today, they are so brand new. If you download the trial copy of Flare, these 4 templates won't be in there. These need to be downloaded from our website. And then lastly, if you decide to become part of the MadCap family, then I highly recommend you check out our user conference right here, Southern California, San Diego, in June of this year at the world famous Hotel del Coronado, one of the most beautiful venues in San Diego. It will be 3 full days of immersive instruction on all of the MadCap software products, and a great way to meet your peers, share techniques, meet the staff at MadCap Software, and just have a general good time. All right, so with all of that, thank you so much. I hope this was informational, maybe a little bit entertaining. I hope you got the answers you were looking for. Once the recording gets wrapped up, we will get it posted up to the website as a recorded webinar, probably sometime later this afternoon. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day and an even better weekend.